Welcome back to the Adventures of Chris and Mike. In this episode, we're going to be visiting the historic Fort Meade Museum in Sturgis, South Dakota. Join us now as my good friend Chuck Rambow takes us on a tour of the historic Fort Meade Museum.
At the time that the cavalry was here, at the time that the cavalry was yet a cavalry, the only practical means of communications for mass communication was with the bugle. There were a significant list of bugle calls that were used, everything from the call in the morning, the reveille call, to the first sergeant's call, to the lieutenant's call, to the captain's call, depending upon who you had to contact, to the bugle call late at night, the last bugle call of the day. My dad had the good fortune to learn the bugle very quickly, and he became the bugler of headquarter troop, 1928 to 1931. So we have in the case the bugle that Dad used on the 4th Cavalry tabard, and the picture of Dad as he's coming on duty one day in June of 1930. Dad was very, very proud of the fact that the headquarter building that we're in now is the building that became the museum, and the building that he used as his communications room, where he received the orders to offer whatever bugle call, is now our gift shop. That was a matter of considerable pride. This summer, unfortunately, we had one of the OCS command instructors die adjacent to us of a heart attack. And 3 days later, they had a memorial service for that trooper from Arizona. And they needed a second bugle. The only available bugle that I had was Dad's bugle. So I came to the case, got it out, asked that if they could remove or if they could keep the 4th Cavalry tabard on the bugle, and that bugle was used for the echo of taps, when taps was played. And when the trooper returned the bugle to me, he said it has an absolutely beautiful sound. And I personally am sure that Dad was up there smiling, very, very happy that his bugle was used again. My mother's family all were raised on the Rosebud Reservation. My great-granddad was what they called a boss farmer, helped the Lakota to build homes and plant corn and do the things that were necessary to make that transition from the hunting culture to a corn planting people. It wasn't an easy period of time, because the Lakota were convinced that they should not plant corn, particularly the men, because planting corn was women's work. My grandfather inherited my great-granddad's job. My great-granddad's name was Hugh Caton. My dad was named after my granddad. He was Hugh William Caton. And I've always been a little bit curious. Caton is spelled C-A-T-O-N. If you pronounce the word in Lakota, it comes out Shatan, which is the word for hawk. And I've always wondered if there may have been some of the Lakota that made the association. My granddad and the family of 7 kids, granddad, grandmother, and the 7 kids all moved to Sturgis in 1916. My granddad spoke very fluent Cheyenne and Lakota. In 1917, the United States goes to war. And in 1917, a very considerable number of Cheyenne and Lakota sign up to fight for the United States in World War I. The basic problem being that the majority of the soldiers spoke only some English. To facilitate the training, the government felt that it was necessary to have somebody who spoke fluent Cheyenne and Lakota. And so my granddad, who had just settled in Sturgis in 1916, became a temporary first lieutenant of the National Guard. They called it then the Home Guard. And this was the training station for the Lakota and the Cheyenne. I had the privilege of talking to an old man about 1970, an old Northern Cheyenne, who was one of the people who had volunteered for service in World War I. He was telling me about coming to the post, but he was very, very happy because when he came to Fort Meade, his training officer told the Cheyenne and the Sioux that if they wanted to go up to Bear Butte and have a prayer for 4 days, 4 nights in the old way, they could do that. He said, the old man I was talking to in 1970 said, I think I was the first of our Cheyenne who was allowed to come back up to the mountain and pray before the people were legally allowed to come many, many, many years later. I wish I had gotten the name of that old man. I'm very sorry that I never did. But I'm very proud of the fact that it was my granddad who gave them permission to go up to the mountain to offer prayer.
Stay tuned for more episodes of The Adventures of Chris and Mike as we continue our tour with Chuck Rambow at the historic Fort Meade Museum. And please subscribe to my channel.